You are now listening to the Mythic Rare podcast with your host, Graham Pollard and the icon, Willie B.
Welcome to the Mythic Rare podcast. This is episode 5, and what a huge week in Magic. And there's no better person I would like to talk with to this about than the icon, Willie B. Willie B, it's an honor.
Oh my gosh, the honor is all mine, Mr. Pollard. Finally, we get to both express our loves for esports and, more importantly, Magic the Gathering and a Mythic Championship as well, too. Not just any bland old tournament. Mythic Championship V was this past weekend, and it was absolutely electric. Lived up to the hype and more.
Yeah, it's the greatest week in sports. I mean, name me a bigger sporting event than the Mythic Championship. You can't do it.
Yeah, it's really impossible. You know, League of Legends Worlds, so what? I'd rather watch some Mythic Championship.
Super Bowl, boring. Turn that off.
Yeah.
If it's competing with a Mythic Championship's getting the nod. But anyways, you're back this week. You were on vacation to Africa last week.
Yes, so I was.
Teach all the African children Magic the Gathering. You're a very philanthropic guy. I got to give you that.
Oh, what can I say? I just love helping the kids.
Yeah, the kids, I'm sure, were much appreciative of that. And I know you were all huddled around your TV or your phone streaming Javier Dominguez immaculate tournament run, I got to say.
Oh, my gosh. Truly. If you had told me Javier Dominguez was going to win the Mythic Championship, first of all, I would have laughed at you. Well, after day one, you know, if you'd said it beforehand, I'd be like, okay, you know what, that's reasonable. But after day one, I thought that there was no chance that man was ever going to even compete to win the championship at all.
Yeah, I mean, even he admitted going into it that he didn't think that he wasn't incredibly confident in his deck selection with Gruul aggro. And I mean, I don't blame him, especially after round one. The deck just did not perform.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy to see. And it's the weirdest part is, I mean, Gruul aggro obviously didn't get played like that much besides him, but nobody else saw the success that he was able to see. So it brings along that question of like, did he just get super lucky? Did he just play it to an absolute T? Did the people he played against just not fully understand like how to play against it? I don't know, but you love seeing somebody be able to take something that was, you know, deemed weaker and be able to absolutely thrive underneath it.
Yeah, so after round one, I believe there was a total of 4 players playing the deck, but the other players besides Javier had a combined record of 3-12. And in a Magic tournament, you just do not see decks that perform so poorly win the whole thing at the end of the day. And that's what Javier Dominguez did. And I think even he would admit that he definitely luck played a little bit of a factor in his draws, but any person that wins any championship in Magic is going to have luck on their side. That's just the nature of the game. But it also has just got to further the point that Javier Dominguez is, I mean, it's hard to make an argument against him being the best player in the game after his tournament run.
Yeah, it was absolutely electric. And, I mean, I'm excited to see what the future holds for him for these future tournaments. I feel that this tournament especially was very exciting. There was a lot of really good things about it. The only thing that I would kind of bash would be the fact that there was no pyro. There was no, you know, absolute electricity at the very beginning. And I think that's what's something that like esports are especially good at, is having these extra extravagant entrances, especially into their championships, that you just want to be able to watch and just be able to feel that electricity throughout the entire arena.
Yeah, I mean, Javier had the finger guns going, and the players were trying. There was some good, walkout entrances, but yeah, definitely a step backwards by Wizards to remove the pyrotechnics element from the walkouts. I mean, I'm sure it was probably the reason they didn't have it probably had something to do with the venue that the tournament was held in, more so than like them not wanting to do it, I'd imagine. But come on, you can come up with something. I mean, we've been talking this whole podcast about how they need to increase the showmanship of the game, and in my opinion, step in the wrong direction this tournament that will hopefully get corrected in Richmond for Mythic Championship 6.
Absolutely. Which, who knows? Maybe your two favorite co-hosts will make an appearance in Richmond at some point.
Yeah, to be totally honest, and I didn't tell you this before we started, but I've been aggressively sending LinkedIn messages to people at Wizards of the Coast to try to get them to sponsor our tailgate with our podcast before the tournament.
I think that would be absolutely electric. It would be something that would be huge and monumental into the growth of Magic the Gathering championships.
Well, yeah, I think so too. I think it would be a massive bonding experience for the community of Magic players around Richmond at the very least, schedule a viewing party. If they're not going to let people watch the tournament live, or I don't think they're going to give tickets out to it, unfortunately. But hopefully I'll get some emails back. We'll see. But anyways, I want to get back to Javier because there's just some crazy numbers about his run to winning it all. So first of all, he barely made it past day one on tiebreakers, made it 4-3. Day two, he also posted a 4-3 record, getting through on tiebreakers. And then, so squeaked by in the top 8. He was the only player in the top 8 to not win 5 games and the only player to make it in on tiebreakers. So already he couldn't have been feeling good going up against the crazy Czech player Stanislav Sivka, who is just an absolute genius when it comes to deck making, was the number 1 seed heading into it, and presented Gruel Agro's worst matchup, at least statistically, going into the day.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the mindset behind him is just unbelievable. Like it's quite crazy to see somebody, and this is what me and you both love, is people coming out of here and coming up with these crazy deck lists, or at least rearranging them in a certain way that is not normally seen. And I mean, Stanislav even got like absolutely harassed and hounded, and may have actually created a rivalry between a couple of Americans. So I'm excited to see what the future holds in that. I think this rivalry that could come with Brad Nelson could potentially be massive for Magic. Like we've said, that one of the best things about Magic is like the fact that at these tournaments, especially the ones, given this one was on via the computers, but when you have that ability to sit across from your competitor, you can talk smack to them, and I think this could potentially lead to some not so friendly banter, if I'm being completely honest. I'm not saying it's severely bad blood, but I'm saying this could be a rivalry that is up there in the makings for one of the top in the sports industry right now.
Yeah, Red Sox, Yankees, Alabama, Georgia, Auburn. Yeah. The list goes on and on.
Yeah.
The
Lakers, Celtics.
Lakers, Celtics. The Czech testing house versus the American testing house in Magic the Gathering. 100% getting to a boiling point in the next year or so, I will say.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I guess we can just dive into that now. So, before we get back to Javier's top 8 performance. So, for those of you listening that don't know, have any idea what we're talking about, Brad Nelson, I'm a big fan. He, and I appreciate him doing this, decided to be very bold, and he even admitted to ruffle some feathers before the tournament started, both on his podcast and on Twitter. So on his podcast, he and his other co-host, Brian Braun-Duin, who both live together and test, that's why I call them the American testing house, because they both live together and are competing at a high level. And the Czech players of Stanislav Sivka and Andrei Stravsky also live together. And, obviously the Czech players that they do were hyping up their deck a little bit. They're saying, look, sorry, we're not coming up with anything flashy. I know this isn't a, mind-blowing, new and never seen before deck like some people were expecting, because that's kind of what their history and their resume has been, coming up with the Kempis, well, first of all, they came with a 4-color Dreadhorde deck. Most people credit them for that. And then the Kefis deck from Last Standard, which is how they qualified for this tournament by debuting that during Mythic Championship qualifier weekend. So I think some people were a little disappointed when they didn't break out anything, super mega fancy. However, they exuded a lot of confidence that they were playing the best deck in the tournament. And on Brad Nelson's podcast, which is called the Bash Bros podcast, it's one of my favorite Magic the Gathering podcasts, other than this one, of course. Him and his co-host were basically saying that they thought it was the worst deck in the tournament. They didn't know what he was doing. And then he doubled down on Twitter by ranking all the decks in the tournament and basically putting Bant Ramp way at the bottom. And this did not sit well with the Czech players, will it be?
Yeah, it did not sit well with them. They had, like we said, they are very smart players, and so they felt almost a little like, wow, you're doubting us, and like you're trying to doubt our intelligence, and so they wanted to put on a show, and they wanted to show that they truly were superior. And honestly, at the end of the day, from this Mythic Championship, they showed that they were the better players.
Yep. Yeah, no, the numbers definitely back that up. Bant Ramp, the deck that they played, had the highest winning percentage with a large enough sample size of any deck in the field. So, I mean, obviously, no one is doubting. Anyone that was doubting the Czechs are not doubting the Czechs after that tournament. There's no doubt about it, except for maybe Brad Nelson, and I respect the hell out of this move, doubled down on Twitter after day one. After both he and Brian Brunduin were out of the tournament, all the Czech players were still in the tournament, including Martin Yuza, who was playing the same deck list. Brad Nelson doubled down and said he would stake his reputation that he would end up with a better winning percentage than the Czechs did.
Yeah, and it looks like he might have lost some of his reputation, if we're going to be honest. If he's a man of his word.
I mean, like he did.
But you know what? That's the type of thing that will motivate him. And like I said, if he will come and like show out come the next tournament, like, and he comes prepared and he uses this as motivation, we could see something. We could see the start of something great, something grand, in the sense of, like I said, a rivalry, but then also maybe just future banter between all Mythic players, and then also the same thing of maybe people are going to try and come up with these more decks to show that they truly are superior, and take over after the Czechs a little bit and be like, you know what? Who says that we can't dominate picking up like our own things?
Yeah.
Like making our own decks and going out on a limb. Because as you said, like the numbers support it. Bant Ramp was the most superior thing. It was
57% win rate during the tournament, which was the highest, except for like
one,
which was only one player played, so it's not a big enough sample size in my opinion.
And then even that 4-color Golos, like it's too similar to a couple other decks. I mean, given Bant Ramp is obviously similar in a way, but like we said, yeah, it had a nice sample size.
Yeah, I think Bant Ramp. Well, I mean, Bant Ramp is, and the Simic Food and the Bant Food, they all play the same core cards, and it's just kind of the support roles that were mixed up. And obviously, when you're playing a game of this magnitude and a tournament of this magnitude, every 75 card in your deck, matters significantly. So it's not like we should undermine the importance of the support cards. But all those decks did play very similar, and all those decks overall had a very good showing at Mythic Championship. But at the end of the day, the wild card Gruul took home the trophy. So that really froze a lot of the data for a loop. I mean, we don't know if Gruul is the best or if Gruul is just not worth playing. It's very polar opposite ends of the perspective between the different players.
Yeah, so it brings up the question of, is there a clear meta? Because I think it was 7 different decks
in the top 8.
The top 8, which is crazy now, given obviously you should never just solely base it off the top 8. But at the same time, it's hard to, with the field of this many people and the fact that you have to play multiple games in order to even get in the top 8. It's not like, oh yeah, you just win like 1 or 2 games. It's the fact that you have to win numerous games to even get into the top 8 is massive, and shows that like you need to win and be able to compete against all decks. And I think that was the cool thing. And like I said this in our very first episode, of the fact that the reason why I love Magic is the fact that it's kind of unpredictable. Because if you'd had to make a guess, you were going to say that Golos was going to just absolutely wipe the field. And you can make the argument that that's still the most dominant deck. because even though only one person made the top 8 using it, 9 through 16 all use that same deck. So clearly it's one of the top tier ones, but it raises the question of, is it just good or is it great?
That is a very big question I think everyone should be asking. Of course, Field of the Dead got banned, so hindsight is 2020 on that one. But yeah, I think if you had to predict how many banned Golos decks would be in the top 8 going into it, I'd say you'd have to say at least 4, if not 5, probably. Just statistically, based off the numbers and based off of the predicted matchups going into it, because a lot of people thought that banned Golos had a favorable matchup against Simic Food, and a lot of people thought that Golgari Adventures had a favorable matchup and was one of the best lists in the tournament, and Golgari Adventures had by far the most underperforming showing of the tournament. Like that, I mean, if you're just looking at the numbers, that shows that people's opinions on, what the meta was and what the top tiers in the decks are maybe not 100% accurate if you're just looking at this tournament. I get it's a small sample size, but disbanding of Field of Dead will definitely be interesting to see, what shifts if we see totally new archetypes that were not allowed to flourish because of Field of Dead, like Esper Stacks or Simic Flash, if they can become a major presence again, or if we're just going to see Simic and Bant ramp and Simic Food run away with it like they did in the tournament, and if there's not going to be anything to stop them.
Yeah, I mean, it was also, the one thing, though, about banning Field of the Dead is, did they ban it too quickly? And also, there was a lot of people talking about, like, would they ban other cards? And the fact that Field of the Dead was the only card that got banned, I think maybe leaves a bad taste in some people's mouths. Because, like we said, clearly, if it wasn't, like, dominating the top 8, how can it be such a great card that it needs to be banned?
Yeah,
so it brings up the question of what classifies as being banned. Like, I think if obviously if all top 8 had used the Golos, then obviously you would need to ban Field of the Dead, but only one, and so it brings up the question, like, there's clearly got to be counters to it, correct?
Yeah, well, there is, and so 2 things. One, they did mention in the banned and restricted article that the decision to ban the card was made previous or prior to the tournament, and the tournament's results didn't affect their banning decision at all. And I do believe that. However, I also think that on Monday morning before the announcement, they had to have been scrambling. And I think there could be some regrets in the banned and restricted announcement. I really do. Because, first of all, we saw that, I mean, yes, it is kind of a meta warping card, because really, if you're building a deck, you need to build it with Field of the Dead in mind. And I understand that could qualify a card for being banned. However, deck lists were submitted 10 days before the tournament started, and the meta, and you even saw it on Arena, adapted a lot in those 10 days to be able to handle Field of the Dead better than it was, when the deck lists were submitted. And on top of that, with Field of the Dead just really doing average in the tournament, I mean, average is saying it nicely, in my opinion, you're probably looking at, if you did the tournament today and you submitted the deck list today, and you had the same exact players playing Field of the Dead, and then you told every other player to resubmit their deck list to any deck they want, I bet you Field of the Dead's winning percentage drops down to like 45, 43, maybe even lower. And obviously I have no hard evidence to base that on, that's just my opinion. But I just feel like people were able to come up with ways to tackle that deck. And in my opinion, if you're able to, come up with ways to tackle a card, and if a deck that features a card is having a winning percentage less than 50%, in my opinion, I don't think it has to be banned. I mean, I understand the banning. If it was me, I probably would have leaned towards either no ban or ban that in addition to one of the Simic cards.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's, like you said, they obviously, if they are sticking by their statement of they banned it previous to the results, I mean, I guess it makes sense because clearly, like you said, a lot of people were building their decks around Field of the Dead, and it seemed like the only way to possibly compete. But I agree. I feel like if they were going to ban that, they should have at least banned something else, just purely out of, like, what's it called? Meaning, yeah, purely out of like just appreciation. And that's not the proper words.
I
What
know what you're
word am I
saying.
looking for? Yeah.
Yeah, but you're saying that to balance the
Yeah,
meta
yeah.
in a certain way. Yeah, I think I was in that same boat a lot after the tournament, and now that we've had kind of a day and a half, 2 days to simmer on it, I'm slightly changing my opinion on that a little bit because Oko is an insanely good card, but Oko is kind of, one of the big cards they marketed the new set around and one of the, face cards for the set. So it is just business-wise a little odd to ban a card that a lot of your marketing material is based around 2 weeks after, a little bit more than 2 weeks after the set was released. So from a business standpoint, that doesn't make sense. Granted, that shouldn't have anything to do with the gameplay, but they also, I mean, they didn't close the door on that card getting banned in a month or two, if it has to be. So that's an interesting option and a good thing for people like us to discuss for the next 2 months at least. So I can't complain about that.
Yeah, gives us content.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with getting more content. What do you think about having to submit the deck list 10 days before the tournament starts, and also them releasing the deck list to the public 4 days before the tournament starts?
I think the fact that you have to release your deck list so early is honestly kind of ridiculous in my opinion. I mean, the 4 days, I guess I could understand. I would be fine if it was 4 days before, like for everybody, if everybody found out on the same day. I think it would make it a little bit more entertaining. Because here's the thing is, it kind of obliterates creativity.
So are you saying that, you mean by the same day, you mean like the day the tournament starts?
No. Like, because you said that how the players knew 10 days in advance, and then it was released to the public.
No, sorry. The players had to submit their decks for the tournament.
Yeah, 10 days in advance. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we were both saying the same thing there.
Yes, and then it was released to the public officially 4 days before.
Yeah,
I was saying that I'm fine with 4 days as long as everybody finds out that same time. Because
that's an interesting take, actually, and I kind of like that because it's kind of a weird moment where you want the pros to be promoting themselves before the tournament, but also they don't want to be talking about their deck list and strategies before they have to in order to give it away. So it's like you're asking people to promote their deck when they can't talk about their deck until 4 days before, if that makes sense.
Like the only thing, because the thing about having to release it 10 days in advance, and I mean, even 4 days in advance, kind of early for me. Like, I get the understanding behind it because, like you said, you want to promote it and you want to make the game grow, and you want to have that ability to talk about and hype people up about these certain things.
They want content creators like us, I think, is the reason behind it, to be able to analyze the deck list and have time to write articles and do predictions like we did on this podcast. So it worked out for us.
Yeah,
some of the pros don't like it because in their opinion, it kind of takes away like the Christmas morning feel of like not knowing what anyone's playing until the tournament starts. So there's been mixed opinions on it, I think. But
yeah, I think that's a huge point. Like, I think it would be, and especially even from our standpoint where we are on the show, like, yes, obviously as content creators, we'd like to break it down beforehand. But I think that idea of just having somebody, like, imagine the potentials of the decks that the Czechs could produce.
Yeah, if they had more time.
Given nobody knows what's coming. Because the thing is you can throw out something that's kind of, strange and kind of seems like a jank deck.
That's actually a really good point, Libby. Yeah, because like the element of surprise, I didn't even think about that until you brought this up. One of the best parts about the Czechs coming up with like the Kefis combo for the Mythic Championship qualifier is nobody knows how to play against it. And if you come up with a wild deck like that and give people 4 days to play test against it, it's not going to be as big. I mean, the element of surprise is going to be gone. Granted, I mean, you're not going to have built your deck around it, but you're going to at least have as an opposing player, at least have the advantage of knowing how to play against it, which can make a big difference.
Yeah, I agree. So that's just one of those things. It's very interesting to see because I get it on both sides, and I mean it happens in sports every day. Where you obviously have to submit your roster like a day or two in advance, or like the day of, like, and who's inactive and who's not, and you have to so the other team can prepare for it. But I think that's part of the beauty is not being able to prepare for it. Because I mean, like, here's the thing though, all of these players, they kind of know what they're gonna run, based on previous tournaments and watching them, especially the
they
players
usually have like a lot of them have a style that they like. Like some players kind of like to stick with aggro, some players like to stick with control, and if it's worked with them in the past, then they'll continue to do so. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can always see that, like, so you can still scout your opponent and plan for them. Because, like you said, everybody's going to fall to their tendencies regardless. Like, it doesn't matter. You're going to lean towards your tendencies. Like, if you tend to play aggro, you're going to continue playing aggro. It's not like one day you're just going to stop
most of
playing
the
aggro.
time. I mean, if one deck is totally dominant, then, you got to do what you got to do to win.
Well, yeah.
But I think in general you're right on what you're saying. One thing we have to talk about, though, and I think this is not a hot take, but it is absurd to me that in your marquee tournament you're having games crashing and you don't have a way to resume the game at the point where you left off.
Yeah, that just seems so crazy to me. Like, it's the fact that, like, especially now, like, what's the point of doing it? Like, now you bring up the question, what's the benefit of playing online?
Right. Like, that's just such a black mark on the game to have matches affected with a lot of money on the line by the game crashing. And if the game is going to crash in, like, the optimal setting with the best computers that they have, sponsored by Alienware, and like, I'd assume the best connection they can possibly get. Like, if it's going to crash in your marquee event, what does that show for, like, everyone else in the world just playing on a regular arena, like, every day? Well, it's a terrible look, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's just such a you can't have that happen. Maybe it's some local tournament. Yeah, sure, whatever. You're playing, arena online, whatever. Your LAN crashes. Sure, it's overloaded. But this is a marquee championship that is being streamed to thousands of people and being played for quite a bit of money too. Like, these are people's livelihoods. People are spending hours and days and months preparing for these tournaments, and to have it come just because, like, to lose just because your computer crashed and now you have to restart from where you were.
Yeah, and that happened to somebody too. I only heard one side of the story from the guy that it happened to, but according to him, he, like, was on the verge of winning a game. It shut down. They had to completely restart it because somehow they haven't come up with a way to either just reset the game from where it crashed or to manually go in and like, put life where it was, put the right cards in people's hands. You'd think that they'd have some sort of code built in where you'd be able to do that by now. Because it happened last tournament too, and they just haven't fixed it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I'm all one for controversy, but this is just something that seems so inexcusable.
Negative controversy. This is not the controversy you want to have surrounding your marquee event.
Yeah, like, I mean, I've always been a big proponent of, in sporting events, I like the human error aspect of things, but I think it should always be left at the human error. It should never be a technical error. For example, I think for those of you that are soccer fans and, you watch the World Cup, one of the most replayed things is obviously the hand of God goal where Diego Maradona in the World Cup scored a goal off of a handball. Like, something like that kind of controversy because the refs missed it. I think that kind of controversy is sweet. But the controversy of where a computer crashed and you were dominating or you were winning and, now you can't even reset from where you are when the whole game is based around that computer just seems illogical to me and just makes no sense. Yeah. And it's honestly quite disappointing.
Well, sorry.
Yeah, no, you can.
Okay, well, I was gonna transition. So speaking of controversy, I do like how they handled the Li Shijian Hong Kong
Oh yes,
situation. They could not have handled this both differently than how Hearthstone did, and in my opinion, at least better than how Hearthstone did.
yes, I agree. Like that's the thing. Hearthstone. So for those of you that don't know or somehow missed it, there was a player from Hong Kong in Hearthstone, and he obviously was protesting and like talking about the liberation of Hong Kong and like the freedom and whatnot. And Hearthstone actually banned him originally for a year. Blizzard did it for a year, took away his earnings, and then they at least came to somewhat of their senses after people were absolutely obliterating them for it. And he was banned for 6 months and was able to get his earnings back. But Magic handled it so much better. They let their player speak about it. They, were open to it. And I think that's what's really cool because, like we've said, from the very beginning about Magic is like the reason why we love this game is obviously because of the game itself, but also the fact that like it can bring people together of so many different parts and so many different paths. And I think the fact that it's a worldwide game that's been around for so long, it's important that we truly show that we're united with everybody. And I can't think of a more like perfect situation because at the end of the day, I don't know how you stand with anybody besides the Hong Kong protesters. I really don't. That's just me. And same thing. I'm not afraid to share that opinion because that's the beauty of Magic is we're at this point where we can stand and speak in what we firmly believe in. And I think that was really cool that Magic let them do it. And obviously, the reporters are kind of like, how do I handle this? But the fact that they didn't try and cut them off or they didn't try and steer them through, they just kind of let it happen naturally, I think is so huge. Because obviously you don't want to try and make anything, where it's like the PR people, you can clearly tell that they were like, oh no, like don't say this at all. It's one thing to be like, yeah, don't bring it up. Like you don't have to bring it up.
Yeah, no, they didn't encourage it by any stretch of the imagination. I personally think they could not have handled it better, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised with how and Li Shijian was appreciative of it on Twitter too. But basically they let him play with like a mask over, not a mask, but like the bottom half of his face covered via a bandana or ski mask or something. And then he also gave a very, very, very passionate, one of the most passionate interviews I've ever heard following a Magic the Gathering match, where he said, first of all, it was a really good match where he made it into the top 8 in the featured match. And basically, he was just saying, it feels so good to win as a free man. And, Becca, the reporter, a little flustered, but she kept her cool and she responded to it very graciously, I think. And didn't try to, immediately change the subject, didn't encourage him to keep talking about it, but played it very neutral, basically just said, yeah, we can really see how passionate you are about that, and then moved on to the next question. Really good way to handle it, in my opinion. So, as much as we criticized Wizards for the game crashing, they did do one thing very well this week, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that was absolutely massive and an instrumental part in not only the game, but just shows, standing with people. And it's more than just a game. It's, our livelihoods. And we really do want to make it a global game where everybody can enjoy it. And we stand with all people.
Yep. And I want to read out Li Shijian's tweet afterwards because this was one of the most trending tweets from the tournament on Twitter. So I think it's important to share, but he basically said, about if I worry about getting punished, I am thankful no one stopped me from wearing the mask for Hong Kong this weekend. I'm sure Wizards of the Coast will receive pressure like the NBA. If you want to protect me, reward them, buy their products, play MTG Arena, especially Hearthstone players. So you can see how the difference between player reaction, on one hand you have Hearthstone where they got one of the biggest backlashes in esports history from their community. And on the other hand, you have Li Shijian, encouraging the community to reward Wizards by buying their products and also encouraging Hearthstone players to move over. So a good example of how, you can handle a PR situation correctly. And Hasbro does probably have a lot of influence in China. I'm not going to pretend I know the answers on that. But, if you continue to support Wizards, as Li Shijian said, then that might not matter. So,
yeah, exactly. I agree. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing is especially with Hearthstone, they just butchered it so badly that even college kids end up getting banned. I don't know if you ever saw that with the American University versus I want to say they were playing WPI, which is Worcester Polyester University, or not Polyester,
Worcester.
Worcester. Yeah, sorry, Worcester.
Worcester.
Yeah, whatever. Same thing. I get it.
Not
You're
the
from
same thing.
Massachusetts.
Not
You're
the
from
same thing.
Massachusetts.
You
whatever.
just did what every person not from Massachusetts in history has called Worcester. So
I know. I'm sorry.
fell into the trap.
I know. I fell into the trap. But WPI, I believe, was the team they were playing in American University. They were about to lose, and right before they lost, they wrote on this whiteboard, because the way that they do their games is they stream, like face stream from their central locations, because obviously they can't afford to fly everybody face to face. So they have to stream it. And so American University students put up Free Hong Kong Boycott Blizzard. Yeah, right onto their thing. And they originally weren't going to get any punishment. And then that actually ended up backlashing on them, because they were like, how are you going to punish this player, but you're not going to punish us?
Oh, so they ended up
so then they finally ended up, they actually ended up, giving them a 6-month suspension as well, too. And so it was absolutely electric.
Well, moving on before China censors us.
Oh, exactly.
No, I'm just kidding. But so I heard Ken Yukihiro is your new favorite player, Willie B.
Oh, yes. So obviously I went in. Obviously I wasn't here to make my proper predictions last week, but I was with the German juggernaut Kai Bud. But however, afterwards, after watching this tournament, I found a new friend, so to say, and that was obviously because of the way that he played his deck. So he went with the let me find the exact stats of like how the deck played as a whole, and then also, I mean, he obviously made a slight.
He made top 8.
Yeah. He did
Mardu Knights
top
actually
8.
Did well in the tournament, though, which was a little surprising to some people. Thanks in large part to Ken's performance. I will say that.
Yeah,
which wasn't Mardu Dino Knights, I think, is the proper name for the deck. But
yeah, so he played the Mardu Knights, and I mean, he did well with it. The reason why, like I said, I decided to become a huge fan, so to say, and the reason why I was encompassed by him is obviously, one, his walkout, absolutely electric.
Oh yeah, when he swang the Embercleave sword, that was incredible. Dude, so much passion behind that one.
Yes, so obviously that's what I love about Ken Yukihiro, and then also just the fact that he was able to win with a slight twist on the deck as well too. So he didn't just use like the typical Mardu Knights. He switched it up a little bit, and I think that little bit of change in the fact that he was willing to use a deck that was not just the typical one is what really drew me in. Also, I just want to say that
such a fun deck.
That deck blew up so much. Like, so to put it in perspective, his other tweets, has like 23 favorites, like no retweets like before this, and then he posted his deck list, and it had 162 retweets, 543 likes.
There you go.
And then it was talking about whenever he was making, made top 8, that one made 1.3 likes, 1.3K likes. And so Ken Yukihiro has definitely become one of my favorite ones.
He won the hearts of Magic players. Well, he already had, I think he was already a fan favorite, but continued to win hearts of Magic players across the country with that deck. Unfortunately, my prediction going into it, Rakdos Sacrifice, did not perform the way I was hoping, with a solid 0-4, the goose egg in round 1. So that's too bad. But we'll get him next year, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll get him. It is what it is. Sometimes it's just not your day.
Yeah. He said he kind of got mana screwed, but also just 0-4 is 0-4, unfortunately. What you going to do? I think the deck could be better, to be honest. I think he could have easily got away with playing 22 lands instead of 24. But also, I'm not a Mythic Championship player, so who am I to judge?
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, they went in with what they thought was best. We can all sit around and, like we said, hindsight gives us 20/20 vision. he might have been able to face some people that favored his deck, the Rakdos Sacrifice, a little bit. He might have had some help beforehand and felt very confident about it. And then it just fell short once he had to put it into real action. And that's perfectly fine. I mean, it happens to the best of us. It's just a matter of, will he go back to the drawing board, and will he be able to take, full responsibility of this and, use it properly?
Yeah. So I actually have some consumer advice here for the first time ever. I believe that I have been playing with a potentially new tier 1 deck that I have created under heavy inspiration from the deck that Captain Jamoke, who was on our last podcast, great guy. You should check out his channel and all his decks he posts on AFR Hub, because they're pretty good. But basically, his big innovation was to take the Golgari Knights deck that everyone has and everyone knows, and to add Karn to it. And then he kept tweaking it, and eventually he ended up with an Abzan control list that is very, very cool. It's a complete new archetype. Pretty hard to play, to be honest, but it's super fun. It basically wins by the Sword Master, the Sword Master Lucky Clover combo, which is nothing new, but it also plays Abzan colors. It plays 4 copies of Karn and 4 copies of Doom Foretold, so it's more of a control shell, which is very interesting. I've gone a different route. I've gone with keeping with Golgari, but I have kept the Karn, and then I've also added, and this is kind of the key element, I'm surprised no one's doing this, 2 copies of Wishclaw Talisman to the main board, and then 1 copy to the sideboard that you can pick up with Karn. And this card is insanely good in this deck, because basically the way this deck wins is it gets a win from the jaws of defeat, which is awesome and fires me up every time. Because it doesn't really do anything usually for the first 5, 6, 7 turns of the game. And then eventually you can just slam out the Sword Master combo. Because by then you've usually got enough mana to put down 4 or 5 Knights a turn. Hopefully you've got a couple Lucky Clovers out. You can easily do 10, 15 damage in 1 turn. What that deck was lacking, though, was the ability sometimes to... Because a lot of times what I found with that deck is it comes down to the last turn. You need to win on this turn or you're going to lose the game. And you just run out of steam sometimes when you didn't have the right cards. But Wishclaw Talisman is the for those who don't know, it's a 1 colorless, 1 black artifact. Basically, you only want to use it once, and when you use it, you can tap it for 1 mana, search your library for any card, and put it in your hand. And then the twist is that once you do that, the opponent gains control of the card, and they get to do the same thing. But the way you want to use it, and the way to use it correctly, in my opinion, is to basically save it until it never gets to the point where your opponent needs it. And what I mean by that is that you want to basically use it to fetch the last combo piece you need to win. So usually that's either an extra copy of Lucky Clover or an extra copy of Smitten Swordmaster. And I've actually found that it's extremely consistent to do that. And you don't really lose much by taking... I made room for it just by taking out 1 copy of Once Upon a Time and 1 copy of Order of Midnight, because Order of Midnight you don't really need to run 4 of. And it's been insanely good. Plus you can find it with Karn. The other cards that you can get from Karn that I'm running that are really good, 1, Bolas the Citadel, absolute MVP in this deck if you're going up against anything that's not an aggro or mono red deck. Because Bolas the Citadel, you usually get it down, you got 15 life, and you can frequently play 4 or 5 Knights without any mana, which is huge for the success of the deck, and then play the Smitten Swordmaster from your hand and win the game automatically. I'm also running Witch's Oven, which you might not think is good right off the bat, but it can be extremely useful at times because you can have the actual creature part, the Smitten Swordmaster out on the battlefield, sacrifice it with Witch's Oven, and then if you have an Order of Midnight in your hand, you can use that to retrieve it from your graveyard and then get the combo off that way. I'm also playing a couple more cards. I'm playing the Great Henge. I'm playing the Black Legendary Artifact, Cauldron of Familiar. A couple others. I'll post a deck on AFR Hub. But I've been winning with this deck at a higher rate than I've ever won with a deck before. And I think it's basically just an upgrade all around from the previous versions of the stick that people have been running. So yeah, there's some rare actual, competitive consumer advice that I believe I'm giving out on this podcast. We're making history today.
Oh, absolutely. Make it, just setting the standard for all future podcasts out there, setting the bar, being like, here you go. You get the advantage coming here to the Mythic Rare podcast. You get to hear Mr. Pollard himself tell you and give you proper advice on how to win games in MTG Arena if you've been struggling lately.
Yep. And so next week we'll be back to more of the original format of the podcast. I think it was good just to take this week to break down the tournament, give our reaction to the tournament, talk about the storylines, talk about the drama. Congrats to Javier Dominguez for winning. What a run. Owen Gruel, 0-14 going into the top 8 against Bant, Food, Simic Food. Beats 2 of them on his way to defeating DePraz in the final match after dropping the first one, of course, of the double elimination tournament. Wins the last one in dramatic fashion. He's got himself a pretty nice payday making Magic. He's actually won Worlds, won this tournament, has had a lot of success in other tournaments. Congratulations to him. It's good to see someone actually getting a good chunk of change for playing the game. And looking forward to seeing what he is going to be doing in the future.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. You cannot have said it any better. And, if I'm going to go out on one last note, it's just that Ken Yukihiro, I hope you have a fantastic day, night, whatever. And I hope that one day, you can tune in and, maybe even be a guest on our show. It would make my life, honestly. I'm a huge fan now. I'm all aboard the hype train. I'm going to become your new number one fan. I might even have to change my Twitter profile picture from Pitbull because, I am a number one Pitbull fan as well, too. The singer, not the dogs, even though I do love the dogs as well, too. Mr. Worldwide truly is there. But Ken Yukihiro, you have my heart right now. And I wish you nothing but the best of luck in future Magic events. And I will be your number one fan.
Well, it doesn't get much bigger than that, Ken Yukihiro. I think that finally means you made it. Especially if Willie B changes his Twitter avatar.
Oh, exactly.
So that's a good cliffhanger to leave off on, I think. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you all next week.